I think we'll get started. Thank you all very much for being here tonight. This is a community meeting of the Hazardous Waste Reduction Initiative, looking at developing some pilot projects that can lead to progress in reducing hazardous waste. So thank you all very much for being here. My name is Greg Bourne. I'm with the University of California, Davis Collaboration Center, and I'm here to facilitate the meeting. I don't think it'll need a lot of that, but I'll be kind of the timekeeper. I also facilitate the advisory committee for this process, and we had an advisory committee meeting earlier in the day. So just a couple very short kind of logistical announcements, and then I'll introduce the Deputy Director of the Hazardous Waste Management Program to kick off the meeting. The restrooms are out the side door here if you need to use those, and exits, of course, at the back of the room. And I think that's anything else on logistics. And Laz is saying no, that covers it. I'd like to just walk through the agenda just very briefly. It's actually a very simple agenda. We started with an opportunity just to have some one-on-one with advisory committee members as well as DTSC staff to learn a little bit more about the department, about the project, and a little bit more perhaps about hazardous waste as well. For the next few minutes, we're going to be hearing some comments from some of the DTSC leadership and other folks here that have made this meeting possible. Then we have a relatively short presentation on the four pilot projects that are being proposed to kind of move forward with the initiative. And then the bulk of the time is really left for public comment. And that can include some Q&A with DTSC staff, or it can be comments you would like to address to DTSC, presumably mostly focused on this initiative. We realize there are other issues out there that may be on your mind as well. But to the extent possible, we really want to give the advisory committee and DTSC some meaningful input on these proposed pilot projects from your perspective. And then by 8 o'clock, our plan is to end the meeting promptly at 8. We know that's cutting into everyone's evening and travel time to get home, and tomorrow's a work day. So we'll try to be very timely. Now, just a couple other things. On the back table to your left, to my right, back in this corner, are the pilot project proposals. So please feel free to go get a copy of that so you have that for your records. At the entrance desk coming in, we had some comment cards. Some of you may want to provide comments in writing. Some of you may want to speak. So it'd be really helpful for me to know how many people would like to make verbal comments, just so we know how to use our time to allow everybody an opportunity. So if you do wish to speak, please fill out one of those forms, and we'll collect those momentarily. Let's see, what else? I think that's about all we need to say here at the very beginning, short of introducing Deputy Director Antoinette Cordero to welcome you and to give you some additional feedback. Antoinette. This is the recorder. It's not the mic. So we're going to have to speak loudly, or here's a mic if you prefer to use that.
We have an accident waiting to happen here, and I'm just the person to accommodate. Okay. Hi, good evening. I'm Antoinette Cordero, Deputy Director of the Hazardous Waste Management Program. I don't know which one of these to speak into.
Both. I think you can stand up and leave it.
Okay, good. So on behalf of the Department of Toxic Substances Control and the Community Protection and Hazardous Waste Reduction Initiative Advisory Committee, I want to welcome you all and thank you for being here. We recognize that you all have many demands on your time, and we appreciate truly your willingness to take time away from those demands and your families to be with us here today. I am the Deputy Director of the Hazardous Waste Management Program. In that program, the program that I oversee encompasses DTSC's DTSC's responsibilities for permitting, inspections of hazardous waste facilities, enforcement actions, emergency response, criminal investigations, as well as innovative policies such as this initiative, which you are all here to talk with us about today. We have approximately 119 permitted facilities in California, permitted to store, treat, or dispose of hazardous waste. We have more than 900 registered transporters, which are transporters registered to haul hazardous waste. And we have more than 100,000 generators, which are businesses that generate hazardous waste. DTSC is responsible for trying to ensure that all of those facilities, transporters, and generators operate in compliance with the law and in a way that is that protects both public health and the environment. The continued generation of hazardous waste and the disposal of waste in our communities is of great concern to us and obviously to you, or you wouldn't be here tonight. Tonight we're here to talk about our pilot projects, which are projects that have been proposed to try to reduce hazardous waste in areas, both hazardous waste that is generated in large quantities and that affects communities that are disproportionately impacted by the burdens of various burdens of pollution, but particularly hazardous waste. We all know that low-income communities of color are disproportionately bear a lot of our environmental burdens, and hopefully these projects will help to address that problem. So before I turn this over, I wanted to just introduce our staff that's here today. I'll start with our initiative staff, which is Rick Brausch, our Chief of the Policy and Program Support Division, Pauline Batarse, who is the branch chief of the Policy Implementation and Support Branch, David Miller, he's sitting behind a pillar, Senior Environmental Scientist, Jerry Lyle, our Senior Environmental Scientist, Eric Slaff, not here, sorry, Amelia Hicks, our our Program Analyst. We also have Lázaro Cadenas, our Outreach Coordinator in the Office of Environmental Justice and Tribal Affairs, and our main point of contact on these projects. Anna Hostetler, the Office Technician. Where is she? Oh, sorry, way back there. Office Technician in Policy and Implementation and Support Branch. We have Ana Mascareñas, who is the Assistant Director for Environmental Justice and Tribal Affairs. Cesar Campos, a Supervisor in Public Engagement. Cesar will also be providing translation if anyone needs that, translation services. Elsa Lopez, way in the back, Public Participation Specialist out of the DTSC Chatsworth office. And we also have our Deputy Director for the Brownsfield and Environmental Restoration Program. Did I get that right? BURP. Which he promises to change the acronym. So Mohsen Nizemi. And did I miss anyone? Okay, so I want to thank our dedicated staff for all the hard work they've put into this, and I want to thank all of you for being here and for, in advance, for the valuable input that you'll give us tonight. Thank you.
Hi, all. We also do have some other folks, if you can stand up, from a similar member Santiago's office, and then also from Christina Garcia's office, member Christina Garcia's office as well. So thank you all for being here, and I don't know if you all want to say a couple of things or welcome or hello.
Well, just welcome to the Victoria Assembly District. My name is David Juarez, and I'd like to thank DTSC for holding this meeting here in our building, in our district. It's an area, it's a district that is location that is disproportionately impacted by multiple sources of pollution. We've been working very closely with them through Oxide, the facility, the battery plant facility in Vernon. So we appreciate all the effort you're doing, and we're looking forward to furthering the discussion. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Mesa from the St. Garcia's office. We were the ones that offered AB 21 and 53. So this bill, that initiative in its entirety, Assembly members should be passed
Okay, thank you. I'd also now like the advisory council or advisory committee members, if you would, to please stand up and just identify yourself and who you represent on the advisory committee. And not everybody could be here tonight, but those that are here, we'd love to have you introduce. Cynthia, why don't we start with you?
I'm Cynthia Babbage. I'm with the Delamo Action Committee. I'm also the Los Angeles Environmental Justice Network Coordinator. I live in a community that has 2 Superfund sites, and I'm representing impacted communities on the advisory panel. And what we, some of us are hoping to do, like myself, is really change the way that we deal with hazardous waste and not necessarily shipping it from one community to another. We're very interested in technologies that will destroy it completely and safely. And so that's my interest in being on this panel.
Thank you, Cynthia. Ingrid.
I'm Ingrid Rosser. I'm an attorney with the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment, with statewide environmental justice organizations. And my interest is I work on toxicity issues now for a very long time. I'm coordinated with the Senate, which is a coalition of a lot of different communities affected by toxic waste, and specifically interested in reforming DTSC better with DTSC.
Great, thank you. David.
David Askey with Southern California Edison. I'm a principal in the Corporate Environmental Policy Division for Edison.
Thank you.
Representing industry, of course.
Chuck.
Yeah, I'm Chuck White. I'm a registered civil engineer and a registered geotechnical engineer. I worked about 20 years in state government, including DTSC. I also worked in the private sector for about 25 years. I'm here representing the Solid Waste Association of North America and the California Resource Management Association.
Thank you. Okay, and there is material that lists the whole group if you want to see the other members that are on the committee. So it represents a broad cross section of stakeholder interests. Okay, I think without any further ado, I will turn it over to Paula, who will provide an overview of this initiative. And while she's doing that, I'm going to wander around and pick up, if you have any comment cards, if you'd like to speak, I'll pick those up, and then we'll move forward from there. Paula.
I'm just going to move this. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight to learn about the Haz-Waste Reduction Initiative. This initiative is a 2-year effort that began in 2015. Under the initiative, DTSC is to select up to 3 pilot-scale projects with the goal of reducing hazardous waste that pose threats to human health and the environment and that impact environmental justice communities in California. This initiative is designed to leverage DTSC's goal of 50% reduction in hazardous waste generation and disposal in hazardous waste landfills by the year 2025. The Haz-Waste Reduction Initiative is a collaborative effort between the Department of Toxic Substances Control and other government agencies, state, federal, and local governments, the advisory committee, businesses, impacted communities, and other stakeholders. DTSC believes that successful pilot projects must include input from all interested stakeholders. A key element of this project is the formation of the advisory committee to assist DTSC in the selection and implementation of the pilot projects. The advisory committee was selected from a range of diverse stakeholders with relevant expertise in issues related to hazardous waste management, and issues of hazardous waste impacting communities. As you could tell earlier from the introductions, the advisory committee is comprised of highly qualified individuals who have been helping us and spent numerous hours during the last few months to help us with these projects. Since March of 2016, we held a total of 7 meetings. The initial meetings focused on identification of the goals for the projects, and looking at hazardous waste generation amounts and trends in California, and evaluating impacts of hazardous waste on communities in California. We worked closely with the advisory committee to establish the selection criteria for the projects, and then the advisory committee proposed over a dozen of pilot projects, which were then narrowed down to the top 4 projects based on the selection criteria. So the top 4 pilot projects are lead-acid batteries, petroleum refinery waste, contaminated soils, and organic solvent wastes. These projects met the selection criteria, which included that the projects had to be technically feasible, implementable, scalable, and measurable. And also in line with the overall goals of the projects, the selected projects have to focus on wastes that are highly toxic, which means they have potential to cause harm to communities and to public health, and also wastes that are generated in large quantities in California. In establishing these wastes, we used the hazardous waste tracking system, which basically a database that houses all the shipping documents of hazardous waste, or called manifests. Those are wastes that are generated by treatment and storage facilities, transporters, and generators in California. Also, all the selected projects had to lead to tangible benefits to impacted communities. And we used the CalEnviro screen as a guide to identify communities that are disproportionately impacted by multiple sources of contamination. So why did these projects rise to the top, and how they can make a difference to Californians? For the lead-acid batteries, lead has been used extensively in many applications over the years, and that came with a price and resulted in environmental contamination, legacy contamination that we are still dealing with. Lead-acid batteries comprise a large volume of the overall amount of lead being used in the U.S. Lead-acid batteries are used in multiple applications, such as the large batteries that are used in machineries, to small batteries used in different tools, and of course, lead-acid batteries are used in vehicles, in cars, trucks, and motorboats. Exposure to lead can lead to adverse impacts to communities and especially children. Actually, in children, even small levels of lead in the blood have been shown to affect their IQ, their ability to concentrate, and also their academic achievement. And unfortunately, those effects cannot be reversed. They cannot be corrected. Although several steps have been taken to reduce exposure to lead, we really believe that there are still many opportunities looking at lead-acid batteries from manufacturing, handling, transportation, and recycling, especially with all the contamination that resulted in areas surrounding lead recycling facilities, where we can explore further reductions in exposure to lead. Also, this project is a good candidate for evaluation under our Safer Consumer Products program, which is a gateway for a comprehensive evaluation and reformulation of lead-acid batteries. So the information gathered from this pilot project could help inform the selection and evaluation process under our Safer Consumer Products program as a priority product. For petroleum refinery waste, there are currently 19 refineries in California, and these are located in the Bay Area, the Central Valley, and also in the Los Angeles area. So many refineries are located in already impacted areas in California. The refineries are the top generators, are one of the top generators of hazardous waste in California, and they generate many types of hazardous waste, including solvents, spent catalysts, sludges, waste oil, liquids with metals, and also contaminated soils. So this pilot project is an opportunity for us to explore source reduction measures and on-site treatment and recycling options to result in reductions of hazardous waste generated from refineries and reduce also impacts to communities around the refineries. This project also builds on previous source reduction efforts that were completed by DTSC. Regarding the contaminated soils are by far the largest volume of hazardous waste generated in California. In 2015, over 500,000 tons of contaminated soils was generated. So this amounts for over a quarter of the total amount of hazardous waste generated in California. This project allows us to explore innovative treatment options where we can look at destruction of the contaminants in the soils, such as PCBs, metals, pesticides, and the whole myriad of contaminants in the soil. And by focusing on on-site treatment technology, we avoid the need to excavate the soil and ship it to hazardous waste landfills. So one of the key elements of this project is reducing the impacts from avoiding just shifting the impacts from one community, the community that lives around the contaminated sites, to another community, which is the community living around the hazardous waste landfills. Another key element of this initiative is integrating community involvement strategies in the cleanup decisions, basically to incorporate community preferences regarding on-site treatment or off-site disposal. For organic solvents waste, organic solvents are used in several commercial and industrial processes such as paint stripping, dry cleaning, and parts cleaning and degreasing. Only last year alone, there was over 110,000 tons of organic solvents waste generated in California. Those wastes are highly toxic and they can pose risks to workers and children, mainly because these wastes are volatile, which means they can get easily into the air and they can cause inhalation problem. Also, improper storage of and handling of this organic waste resulted in environmental contamination. Organic solvents are very soluble, which means they can dissolve easily in the water, and they have led to groundwater contamination over the years. So this pilot project helps us explore solvent recovery practices and other methods to reduce solvent waste generation and impacts to communities. DTSC, in consultation with the advisory committee, drafted pilot project summaries identifying the various goals and objectives of these projects. And as we move forward with the implementation, I'd like to point out that each of the 4 projects has similar aspects. Some of those aspects, as we proceed with these projects, include: number 1, a broad solicitation of information from various stakeholders, including industry, government agencies, academia, communities, and other stakeholders. And this information will be compiled to establish a baseline for the waste, to identify data gaps, and also to identify regulatory and economic tools. Another basic element for the 4 project is a broad solicitation for partnership or proposals, where we focus on specific projects with tangible reductions in hazardous waste. The findings and recommendations from these pilot projects will be summarized in a report, which is due to the legislature by June of next year. This report will include a set of recommended actions that DTSC and others can pursue to reduce hazardous waste generation and impact to communities. I'd like to point 2 things. Number 1, although the final report is due by June of 2017, the selected projects, the ones that I covered under the solicitation for proposals, We expect that those projects would extend beyond the June 2017 deadline. Also, although under this initiative we are required to select up to 3 pilot projects, we are proceeding at this time with gathering information on the 4 pilot projects that I covered, and then later we would decide which ones, if any, would be dropped. So just a brief summary of the major milestones. In the selection of the pilot projects was completed in May of 2016. Planning and implementation of those projects will continue through April of next year, and the final report will be completed in June of 2017. We are very interested in getting your comments and hearing your feedback. Thank you for joining us tonight for this meeting. We will hold additional meetings like that, and you are also welcome to provide comments during the advisory committee meetings. There are a couple email addresses that you can use to submit input to us and to subscribe to our e-list. And also Laz is always there ready to help, so give him a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. So at this stage, we're going to move into the part of the meeting where we'll hear from each of you, or as many of you as want to speak. So far, it looks like we have about 7 or 8 people that would like to either ask questions of DTSC or provide some comments on the projects. Now, Cynthia Babich, who's on our advisory committee, had requested that at our advisory committee today or this evening that we could bring some perspective on the Quimetco project, just to again help advise DTSC and the advisory committee on the status of that from a community perspective. So we have with us Duncan McKee, who is an educator here in Los Angeles, and he's agreed to kind of provide some of those perspectives. Duncan, it's great to have you. What we'd like to do at this point is use this mic over here, and we ask that you kind of, for purposes of recording this meeting, that when you are asked after Duncan is finished, we'll move to other people who wish to speak. Just make sure that you identify yourself for the purpose of the recording. And so very good. If you'd come forward and watch the cords. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm Duncan McKee. This is Tom Loaf. We've both actually been working on we're both second generation working on the Quimetco deal. I've personally been working on it since 1996. I do a lot of complaining at a lot of these opportunities to speak, but I actually see the potential for something really positive occurring here. And when we're looking at I just, in about 10 minutes this afternoon, I was going to show a PowerPoint, but I was told that I wasn't going to be able to do that because it was supposedly going to give me some kind of unfair advantage over I don't know who, but anyway, that's beside the point. So I put together a little list of just a few things that could be done to actually reduce the waste coming from the Quimetco facility, or lead acid batteries. Just a little history, and Tom and I both worked since at least 2010 closely with South Coast Air Quality Management District, and I've worked with Mosen. I think I've known Mosen for, it's almost going on 20 years now, probably since we first met. But we worked on Rule 1420.1. And
so close to the mic.
Okay, Quimetco worked very hard on that rule as well, which resulted in Oxide actually going out of business. And from their perspective, I could see it, that it would give them the monopoly, basically this side of basically in the United States, I think, on recycling these batteries. But anyway, I think one thing that could be done, Quemetco, now that Oxide's out of business and they're recycling or processing batteries that were previously going to Oxide, they have a permit, or they have a request for an increase in throughput with South Coast Air Quality Management District of 300,000 pounds a day. So I think one of the first things is that should be denied. Okay, and then Quemetco should actually be required to comply with any and all conditions of their Title 22 permit that was issued by DTSC. Okay, because in 2005, when that permit was issued, and it should have really never been issued, because there were a lot of problems there, and there still are a lot of problems. But when that was issued, the pretense or the thought process was that there would be permit conditions in that permit that would make Quemetco a better place. And to date, that hasn't happened. I mean, there are things that have happened, but there are permit conditions that have not been met to the best of my knowledge. Okay, so the next thing is to reduce the number of batteries coming into the states from all points west of the Mississippi River. Okay, and that includes Canada and actually all over the world. Okay, and I can document what I'm saying here. Okay, I have a list of places from throughout the entire world where lead-bearing hazardous waste is being imported into the country and processed at that facility. So we're asking, and these aren't like these super high-tech fixes here. These are things that can actually be immediately implemented to reduce this hazardous waste stream. Okay, so we're asking to eliminate the importation from all over the world of batteries and lead-bearing hazardous waste that's processed at the Quemetco facility. And at one time, Quemetco was listed under that TRI reporting as the biggest releaser of hazardous waste in the state. Let's see, the biggest releaser of toxic substances into the environment in the state. Okay, and simply by shipping stuff off to Bay, Nevada, that would bring them down in that standing. Okay, so that's a big thing. Our community is wondering why we have to bear the burden of this material from all over the world. And we've heard Quemetco's attorneys say, well, we're making sure that this material that's coming out of these basically third world and other countries is being handled in a responsible manner. Well, keep in mind, somebody's shipping it over there in the first place. Okay? So then, that leads us to, since we know that alternatives are on the horizon to lead acid batteries, we need to start the process to ratchet down the quantity of material processed at the facility and set a realistic drop-dead closure date so that the inevitable cleanup process can commence. And if you want to sit here for the next hour, I can show you documents showing as high as 330 some odd thousand parts per million lead found on that property. Okay, and I can show you documents where DTSC and Quemetco's own laboratory has found hazardous waste levels of lead, and I can show you a picture right here of a mother with her baby in her arms standing right next to that area with no sign warning anybody. Okay, it's not really this great place like it's being depicted to be. I mean, I sit in meetings and hear people just stream after stream. We could be here all night hearing about the people with different types of cancers and everything. And it's not just lead. Arsenic's the biggest risk driver at that facility. And then you have benzene and 1,3-butadiene. You have a bunch of these organic solvents. Okay, that this initiative is looking at as well. Okay, so then the next thing I came up with is that we need to be certain that Quemetco has adequate financial responsibility funding in place to ensure that the financial burden for the proper cleanup of this mess over there is not placed on the taxpayers. Okay, somehow Oxide was able to weasel out of what they're doing. Well, now's the opportunity to make sure the funding is in place to make sure that this place gets cleaned up properly. And I don't know how we're going to do it, because I have documentation, okay, that shows, this is out of DTSC's own reports, showing 1,800 parts per million lead 68 feet below the ground surface. Okay, how did it get there? How are you going to clean that up? Okay, so then we need to begin the groundwater cleanup process, okay? The data show that there is lead, cadmium, chromium, mercury, and a whole bunch of other contaminants beyond the maximum concentration limits. Okay, and it's also DTSC's own scientists have speculated that it's moving down gradient towards unknown points, and the drinking water wells that supply water for millions of people, both in the upper, central, and lower San Gabriel Basin, are right downstream from that facility. Okay, and DT... What's that, Tommy?
How many wells have been closed?
Well, we won't go there right now. Okay, and then we need to begin the cleanup of the contaminated soil in the community and surrounding neighborhoods. And I can take you right now or tomorrow with an XRF and take you right to a spot where there's at least 2,500 parts per million lead, right in the community. Okay, and people have been digging up that soil and dumping it at unknown locations. And DTSC Enforcement Division, Robert Koo doesn't even bother returning his phone calls. Okay, he gives out his number and doesn't even return his calls. It's pathetic. Okay, and I'm going to show you a picture. Here's soil. Okay, since I can't put it in a PowerPoint, but you're welcome to take a look at it. Okay, here's soil leaving Quemetco. Okay, leaving. And it's documented that there's serious contamination. Okay, 335,000 parts per million. Documented. That's 33% lead, for crying out loud. You could probably mine lead off of that property. Here's a picture of that same truck going into Puente Hills landfill, which is not a hazardous waste landfill. Okay, that's serious business. Where's the enforcement division for DTSC? Where's the inspectors when there's holes in the roof that have been caused by the acid eating the roof away and uncontrolled emissions? And Tom Loaf here reporting to AQMD and DTSC this is occurring, and nobody going over and inspecting. Come on, these guys were permitted to take plastic and rubber battery cases that were previously separated and feed them back into the furnace, using them as fuel and reducing agents. Everybody in the community was getting sick. And where's the DTSC inspector? Calling me and saying, I know for a fact they're not doing this. Baloney. Okay? It was occurring. We're smelling it every day and getting sick. So the bottom line is, I could sit up here all day. And what I'm telling you is documented. I could show you the documents. I got them right here in these folders. So we have a good opportunity of how to ratchet this facility down and really change something big over here. We went with USC where there's children playing, little swings with children playing right there, sticking the XRF in the soil and finding high levels of lead that those kids are potentially being exposed to. So we really need to do something here, and we do have the opportunity. And so I urge you to take advantage of it. This committee really has a lot of good opportunity. Quemetco claims they have this great WASP. You should be looking at this. Okay, here's their WASP when it's not functioning properly. Okay, and there's actually a document I have on this memory stick right here where Quemetco makes a statement that no toxic substances were released during this incident. Well, when I made a public records request of both the LA County Fire and South Coast Air Quality Management District, no data existed to demonstrate that that was actually a true statement. Okay, now look, this was taken last week. Okay, this plume, and it's unknown. I don't know what it is. Hey, maybe it's breathable. Who knows? Okay? But that's not coming out of their west stack. Okay? Those are intermittent releases of unknown, at least unknown to me, substances. And I'd be real interested to know if South Coast Air Quality Management knows what that is. Okay, that was taken like within the last 2 weeks. So what else, Tom?
I'm wondering if they know of any hazardous waste manifests. I'm wondering if you guys know of any hazardous waste manifests that Quometco has asked for. You would think that when they're picking up all this lead in the soils, and they know there's lots of lead in their soils, you'd think they would go and get a hazardous waste manifest to dispose of this properly. But they don't. They just take it anywhere they can. We followed the truck that went up to the Puente Hills landfill, and we told them there was lead in that soil, so they denied them entry. Well, then they went right over to the 605 freeway, right next to the 605
To
freeway.
the groundwater aquifers.
And dumped it right there.
Right on top of them. So, I mean, it's a bad situation. And we have the opportunity to make it better at this point. And I think that's our point. I think there's some, we can be optimistic that this committee will actually result in some kind of good changes, because it's time to ratchet these guys down. They've contaminated the community long enough. They've refused to admit it or do any kind of cleanup. And lead-acid batteries hopefully are on their way out. And there's no reason we should be importing them from all over the world and processing them at this facility. And there's no reason that our community should be bearing the burden of batteries coming from all points west of the Mississippi. It would change a lot if there was some kind of legislation to limit the batteries processed there to the batteries that are actually being utilized in California only.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Those that have noted they would like to speak, Rabina, you would come next, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rabina Sewell, and I'm the Executive Director of California Safe Schools. We're a children's environmental health and environmental justice coalition. And I want to thank the DTSC staff, all of the advisory committee members who are dedicating their time and efforts to review these programs and initiatives. I especially want to thank Lazaro. Thank you for reaching out to the community, environmental justice community, and really there's so many EJ staff here tonight and just DTSC staff that have gone out of their way. I really wish that all of you could have been here earlier to hear 4 absolutely incredible presentations. Jesse Marquez gave one of them, and Jane Williams, Rita Loof, and Dr. Wells. Clearly there are many opportunities for innovative strategies, and my hope is that, as we've all talked about, and Duncan just talked about as well, is that the toxicity in one area shouldn't become somebody else's burden. So to the extent that this advisory committee and DTSC staff can begin looking at destruction technologies and continuing why the initiative is progressing forward and positively forward as I see it doing, I would hope that there would be under your purview, to the degree that inspections can continue to ensure compliance, because even if we have these policy programs, legislation, laws, without enforcement, it's really difficult to move forward. And so I just really want to, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for coming to Southern California for this, and thank you.
Thank you. Denise.
I'm going to be the one to not make it pop. Alrighty, I'm going to be a popper too. Denise Duffield, I'm the Associate Director with Positions for Social Responsibility, Los Angeles. Happy to be here today and happy to see these initiatives. Work on a cleanup of the Santa Susana Field Laboratory, where community members there have worked to try to prevent radioactively contaminated materials above background from going to sites like Buttonwillow, which has happened, unfortunately, many times, especially of late. So our communities definitely are aware of that their contamination is going to go somewhere else, and particularly when it's radioactive contamination, they have tried to prevent that from happening to sites that aren't licensed for it. But that said, I do want to say that I would be wary of a one-size-fits-all solution, because there's a lot of different communities that have different needs. I would say that depending on the contaminant, depending on the amount of contamination, depending on the geology, depending on the amount of time to reduce exposures, that what should be prioritized above all is the reduction and elimination of toxic exposures. I think it was 2012 when this initiative was first proposed by DTSC, before there was a committee and there was actually community members working on it. There had been conversation about reaching this 50-50 goal by reducing cleanups. Now, you're not talking about reducing cleanups, you're talking about treatability, and that's a different conversation. However, it was an opportunity there that felt right for exploitation of certain communities and an induction of unnecessary tensions. And so, again, please state my name for the record. Okay. So again, I would ask for a priority of reducing exposures and protecting public health.
Thank you very much. Florence.
My name is Florence Garibian, and I'm the chair of the Del Amo Action Committee, and very happy to be so. I have a mantra. I go to a lot of meetings now, and I speak at those meetings. So I'm going to start with my mantra. The message from the top of any organization sets the priorities and the pace of that organization. And that's a big responsibility and an important responsibility. I say that as a person who's experienced as a manager at DTSC. I say that as a person who did have the experience of doing inspections and supervising inspectors, who went out to a lot of different kinds of companies. And you found out pretty quickly what the guy at the top was saying to the people that work for those companies when you did their inspections. So that message for me is important. The pace of the organization, where people go, how they do inspections, why they do inspections, what they find when they get there, a lot of that is really driven by their feeling that they are supported at the top and encouraged to do the best work they can do. Next part of my mantra is that new technologies, new ways of doing business are essential and cannot come quick enough. And I say this to every environmental organization I work with. Look for new technologies, encourage their development. Rick mentioned in the meeting that we had earlier the effort to reach out to the academic organizations, to go to other states in the country, other places in the world, to look for better ways of getting the job done. And we're hearing about Quamedco, a very sad story of something that's not working very well at all. We really need those new technologies. We need new ways of handling cleanups of Superfund sites. Just so you know, there are no big trucks coming into our community, the Del Amo community, and hauling away big piles of soil from that community. The fact is, not much cleanup has been done there at all. But I know for sure that Cynthia will not tolerate having her problems taken somewhere else where they make other communities unhappy. That is not the solution to the problem. The third thing I say in my mantra is that enforcement is essential for any program, any set of rules, any set of new laws, etc. If they're not enforced, they're not going to do any good. I was interested in discussions of SB 14 because I could remember that as people going out in the field and doing inspections, SB 14 wasn't much of a priority for us. And now I hear that there really are large generators apparently diligently carrying out the mandates of that requirement, and I think that is terrific. I also want to say, at one point we had something called a transportable treatment unit in the state of California. Get on a truck, go out to a site, treat the soil, whatever the wastes were there. And the unfortunate reality was that with the inspection workload we had at DTSC, we didn't have time to find out what was happening with those transportable treatment units. And I always had a question. How does that unit work? What does it do? Does it work? What waste are they supposed to be treating, and what are they actually doing? And that's kind of a germane question for all the things that we're talking about today. I also remember a time when I first started working at DTSC, which was in the early 80s, and under Governor Jerry Brown in the early 80s, and he had a program where he opened an office called the Office of Appropriate Alternative Technologies. And the goal at that time was to divert waste from landfills and to have it treated rather than put in landfills. There was some success with that program in reducing the volume of waste, in that primarily companies were encouraged not to use as much water as they had been using, in a manner of reducing the volume of waste that they ultimately had to get rid of. But it feels a little bit to me like a cycle, and we're back again at reducing the waste. So for what that's worth. One of the saddest things that I read in the fact sheets that were handed to us today is a statement that DTSC, through its former pollution prevention program, selected the refinery industry for 3 separate source reduction assessment reports, 1990 to 2001. And then, not so long after that, the department decided they didn't have the budget anymore for a pollution prevention program, and they disbanded the program. That's a very sad statement, because in a way, maybe we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about this subject if that pollution prevention program had continued. We heard a presentation today about a material that is used as a coating material that does not contain VOCs, that does not have the same risks of many of the coatings that we're all familiar with. This is where we need to go. We need to understand what industries are using what chemicals, what industries are generating what waste, and what are the alternatives to the products that those companies are using that might help to reduce the volumes of waste that are generated. if there are alternatives to lead acid batteries, and as we heard in Jane Williams' presentation earlier, there are, that's miraculous, and that is where we should go. And I am so lucky to work with Jane Williams and Cynthia and Rubina on the work that I'm doing now. They are tremendously sincere, hardworking people who suffer one frustration after another in their effort to get the job done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tracy, how's your voice holding up? No? Okay. We've got your written comments. We'll turn those. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Jesse.
Good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Jesse Marquez. I'm Executive Director of the Coalition for a Safe Environment. We're an environmental justice organization headquartered in Wilmington. Our priority areas that we work in are ports, freight transportation, and the petroleum industry. I did speak earlier before the committee and did a presentation where I gave them a handout, which was a 2-page of 46 questions regarding information that the public needs to know. What I'm going to talk about now is taking a little different route. I'm going to read 3 of the questions, then I'm going to propose a challenge to DTSC. So 3 of the questions I had in there is that, number 24, is the hazardous waste treated and neutralized? Is the hazardous waste recycled? If yes, all or a percentage, and into what type of products? Has any chemical component of hazardous waste been identified that could be feasibly recycled and marketed? Taking off from that, here's an example. There's a thing called gasoline. And way back in time, not too long ago, new regulations were put forth to reduce the amount of sulfur in gasoline. And lo and behold, that presented a problem to oil refineries because now they had to remove sulfur from the gasoline. And as a result of doing that, you can come to Wilmington right now and see these tons and tons of mountains of yellow sulfur that has been extracted from black oil. That sulfur is now sold as pharmaceutical sulfur to the pharmaceutical industry for medicines. Okay, it's also used partially in the agricultural industry and in some other areas too. By giving you one example where an industry doesn't want to do anything, but then turns out, due to legislation, political pressure, environmental movement, that changing an operation can then actually become a financial benefit to them as well. So what is my challenge to DTSC? My challenge is to allocate $100,000 from your budget, not very much money, for you to sponsor an annual symposium. 50,000 of that would basically do rent the hotel, rent rooms, because now you're going to send out an invitation for papers, for abstracts. Because here's what I discovered is out there in the world dealing with waste and stuff. There are oil-eating microbes, okay, that now exist, was used out there in the ocean and the BP Horizon issue over there. Although there are other issues, you don't use it in the ocean because it then destroys other habitat thingies. But in a confined environment, where it can't escape into the other wildlife habitats and biosphere things, there are oil-eating bacteria that can destroy some of that stuff. There is also an iron bacteria, so that it oxidizes dissolved ferrous iron in water and results in ferric oxide. Is there a market for ferric oxide out there in the world? I don't know. But does it help deal with another problem? Yes, it does. There is a bacteria that eats PET, which is your plastic bottles. There is a bacteria that eats alkaline lime waste. There is a fungus mushroom that grows out there in the Amazon in Ecuador that eats polyurethane. So here we have scientists, looking at real world issues of waste and finding solutions to them. So for a $100,000 investment, you invite papers and abstracts from researchers, give them a $2,000 little check stipend for being picked to do a presentation of the paper, and then you compile an annual report of this innovating new type of research, and you'll discover it'll be one of the best investments that you could have ever asked for. And those are my public comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
Hi, my name is Tracy Bagat. Sorry I'm hoarse today. But I'm a consultant with the oil and gas, chemical, as well as aerospace industries. And taking off from where this gentleman left off, my clients try to reduce the hazardous waste. And what we find is that other government agencies stop us. For instance, the FDA, when he said that you can now sell that to the pharmaceutical industry, the FDA has stepped in and said no for several reasons. One, the testing. Two, if it was an import. So I have clients that import chemicals, and the chemical should be USP. If they test that chemical and it doesn't meet the grade for a pharmaceutical chemical, the FDA is forcing us to destroy it or send it to hazardous waste when we can use that chemical for another purpose. But because it was imported and it was sent through FDA, they won't let us do it because they say upon importation, we didn't do a TSCA certificate. So we can't really repurpose those chemicals. A lot of people do it, but under the FDA 21 CFR, it's not legal to repurpose one government agency's chemical for another use without that government agency giving you permission. And I have one client that had good product that had to go to the dump last year, or not to the dump, but to hazardous waste. And we're talking 80 metric tons. That's a waste of chemical when we can take that chemical and repurpose it and use it for another industry. But that government agency will not allow it. We have the same issue with customs. When upon importation, you bring it in and you do the TSCA and send it in as a TSCA item, but you test it and you say, hey, this is good for pharmaceutical use. Customs is saying, no, you didn't send it through the FDA when you imported it, so you can't use it. Another couple hundred tons, couple hundred pounds go to the hazardous waste. So we are wasting tons and tons of chemicals that the different government agencies, because the different government agencies are not speaking to each other. And it's really causing a problem now where I have clients that should be small quantity generators that are large quantity generators because of that. So and I go to the Cooper conventions every year and I bring this up in their meetings as well. And I let them, ask them for help. What can you guys do to help us? Get other government agencies here, not just your agency. We see you all the time, but we need those other federal agencies, state agencies, talking to each other, showing up, listening to our concerns to make sure that we can reduce, because it's not because the industry doesn't want to reduce. We are bumping up against bureaucrats like crazy, and they say there's nothing we can do about it. We can't let it sit around because we can only let it sit around as a large quantity generator for 90 days. So we don't even have the time to speak to another agency to get permission before we have to ship it off. So what do? We're creating a lot of waste because of that. And that's in the chemical industry, aerospace industry, and lots of other industries. So, sorry, that was my, question and concern. If DTSC can help the industry out and do something about that.
Thank you very much. Cynthia.
Cynthia Babbage, Delamo Action Committee. I think what I wanted to say to folks is that it's really heartbreaking to me to hear my fellow community members talk about the life changes that they've had to make and the constant stress of trying to find solutions for the problems in our communities. If the agencies were doing their job, we wouldn't have to do that. And it's heartbreaking to know that we have to come to these realizations. We, as taxpayers, pay a lot of money for people to do their jobs, and we suspect that that's being done. And then when you move onto a Superfund site like I did, it's heartbreaking to find out that you're not being protected. I fight a lot with the US EPA because that's who's in charge of my sites. I'm on this panel, and I really am doing my best to try and bring real community-based solutions to the table because I need my state. I've talked about this before. If I don't have a strong state to stand up and back me up with the EPA, there is no hope for my community. There may be no hope for my community anyway. I think my community, like many others, needs to be relocated. I think that it's criminal to keep people in harm's way when we don't have to. Prevention is the cure. You can't take the poisons out of me from my community, the DDT that's in me. I could take it out of me if I chose to have children and I breastfeed them. It would directly go out of my body and into theirs. These are the things that you have to learn as a community member that are horrifying. And I am just so proud of the community people that came out today. To travel to Sacramento and to be on this panel and to try and make a real difference is really hard if you don't think your community's behind you. Some of these things are hard to tackle, but some of them are really no-brainers. We spend a lot of time in our communities trying to find answers. We have a pocketful that we're ready to implement. You heard some great suggestions from Duncan today. Jesse, we can always count on Jesse to do thoughtful examinations of what's going on in his community. And I do respect a lot of people in the agencies. If we don't have good people working on the inside to work with us on the outside, I don't think there is any hope. And so when we talk about these pilots, and what we're really talking about are what, maybe I'll speak for myself, what I'm hoping to accomplish is not taking our burden and putting it in someone else's backyard, because I can't bear that. I wouldn't wish that on an enemy. And what I've seen in my community of the generations that are growing up there, now we have children that have been exposed to the pesticides and the chemicals, marrying other children from the community, and they're going to start families. How can you even build a foundation on that? And when I hear about people and agencies complaining about this burden that they have to try and deal with legacy wastes, it doesn't make me laugh, because I want to say it makes me laugh, but it doesn't. It makes me cry, because when I look at the youth in my community, that's the legacy I see. I see the burden being shifted on from one generation to another. A lot of people in communities simply pack up and move. I understand that. It's just too much. I think if I would have chose to have children, which originally I chose not to, because I think there's an overpopulation problem on the planet, and I didn't think that I was so awesomely wonderful that I needed to reproduce myself. But that doesn't mean that I don't love everybody else's kids. And it's just really wrong to do those things. So I just want to say, at one point, I turned around and I realized that I was surrounding my community with toxic piles of soil, because I didn't want them to go to somebody else's neighborhood. And the original pilot for the soils was to actually deal with a specific site in my community and a chance that we could do something different. But the agencies, they don't come together. They don't communicate. They're at odds with each other quite often. I'm sure if DTSC was the lead at my site, I would be up here saying, I really need the US EPA to come in and back me up. because that's the hope that we have to carry. We have to hope that somebody really wants to make a difference. And I think with the support of the community people and the agency people, a lot of new people that have come on board that are really old friends, I think that this can make a difference with this initiative. I sure hope so, because I'm getting older. You know, I only have one lifetime to dedicate to this, and I'd like to see something tangible happen in my lifetime. I'd like to be able to go back to my community and say, hey, really great news, now you have to struggle with the fact that you're going to have to relocate. You know, that's what you get if you win. You get ripped out of your heritage, your centuries of living in areas, your identity. But you get the hope of living on and hopefully stopping the destruction. You can't take some things away once they're put in, and that's why I say prevention is the cure. So I just want to say, on one hand, I'm very proud. I'm happy to see some of my colleagues that I haven't seen in a long time. But on the other hand, I'm really going to be upset if this isn't taken seriously and something tangible doesn't come out of this process. So I just really wanted to speak from a community perspective and say thank you for trying really hard, and for those of you who aren't trying really hard and they're trying to just do the same old thing, we're going to get you. We're going to get you. We ain't quitting. We're getting smarter. We're getting stronger. So I say join us and let's try and figure out a better way to do things. Thank you.
Jesse.
I have one more point I forgot to mention.
Yeah, speak into this, if you would.
My name is Jesse Marquez, Executive Director of the Coalition for a Safe Environment, located in Wilmington, California. I did want to mention one more thing, that when I was doing my research for this, that I found in a scientific journal that I think should be #1 reading for DTSC staff in this world of waste reduction. It's called Applied and Environmental Microbiology. Applied and Environmental Microbiology. That if you subscribe to that, it would also open the doors to the things that I mentioned and other future things. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I think I'll turn it over to the Deputy Director for final closing comments.
Thank you all for being here and for sharing those very heartfelt and important comments with us. We learn a lot every time we listen to you, and hopefully you understand that we are listening to you. It is very important to us that you are here and that we get to hear what is going on in your communities and what's important to you. I think those of you who've had the pleasure of hearing from our director directly, Barbara Lee, one of her highest priorities is to have DTSC be more transparent and get more input and hear more directly from the community. And in order for that to happen, we need people like you to show up. And if anything, we've learned anything from the last week, we need people to show up. So thank you all for being here. Those comments were very... I'm sorry, yes?
When you have these type of meetings, why can't the state force some of these CEOs, upper management, to attend when they give their permits? Why can't that be part of the permitting process? Because I think if people have to sit here and listen to the community and see their pictures and see their faces, it's very different than when I take it back to them. I think that should be part of the process. That whoever's in charge should really have to show up and take the beating. I don't think it should just be us in the room.
I'm sure that many of us would like to have those folks here too, to share the bullseye. Our current legislation doesn't allow us to force them to do that, but those of you who agitate for legislative changes, that may be an idea. I think we often do, I shouldn't say I think, we do often invite folks to be here if they want to be here. They are part of the public as well. Any member of the public is invited to be here. And we do let them know about these meetings so that they can be here if they want to be here. For probably obvious reasons, many of them don't wish to be here. I'm sorry?
We have to force it on them. When they apply for their permits, when they get in trouble, when they do their SCP, that should be required. If the law has to be changed, so let it. But that should be required, not just hand over somebody else's money from a budget and say, oh, now it's out of my hair. So they should really have to, and that maybe that's part of the SCP, that they have to show up. And they have to take these beatings that, I end up taking on their behalf, which doesn't hold water to them.
Well, I oversee the permitting division for DTSC, and we are right now looking at what our permitting criteria is going to be under various new legislation that requires us to take a hard look at what the permitting criteria are. And the public will be getting a chance to actually weigh in on that. And I invite you and hope that you will follow up, and all of you pay attention to that, and I really hope that you will give us your input. And that's an intriguing idea. We'll check with our legal office, see if there's any way we could adopt that or what, but that is an intriguing idea. I think it would be useful for...
You go to traffic school, you get a DUI, you go to alcohol school.
Well, we could, so maybe we should make it a condition of the enforcement actions rather than the permit.
Yeah. Even if it doesn't pass legislation, it will force those CEOs out of their desk and say, wait, now let's fight this. And when they come to you to fight it, then what do you suppose? What do you suppose you do about the problem you're creating? This way that will get them out of their office, because I'll go for it, I'm not the CEO. Well, when they come, if they don't help the process, they will give you some suggestions that they have the pen to write those checks and make happen in their organization.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow that last point.
Just say if the legislation goes up for comment and it says we want the CEOs or whoever our managers are to have to go to meetings. Those CEOs don't want to do that. So what they're going to do is they're going to come to your comment period. They're going to come to your meeting, and they're going to strenuously fight you. And at that time, you can get their idea and say, you know what, if you don't want this, now what do you want to do? What do you have within your company that you can do? Because these guys, what I'm saying is these guys are the ones that write the checks for their company. They know their budget. They know what they can do. They can make that check. And at that point, I can tell you now, they're not going to do it unless they are forced to.
I think I probably agree with you on that last point. What we need to explore is what are our options for forcing them to do it. But it's an interesting idea. I personally think that we probably have a greater likelihood of being able to make it part of an enforcement settlement or injunctive relief and enforcement action than a permit condition, but it's worth looking into. But you will, as I said, we are going to be coming out with a proposed policy on how we're going to be looking at permit decisions, and you all, please, I invite you and hope that you will participate in that process.
So, Julian, I'm going to just
Yeah, I think we need to try to record this. We just want to make sure we get your comments.
You know what? Can you stop interrupting me?
Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I'm the court reporter, and I need your comments on the record if you want it to be on the record.
You really don't need my comments on the record.
Okay, then.
They did a thing on the state capitol. They had the head of PG on the state capitol apologize for the Fort Clapping tribe. Part of their project.
Who was that? Who did that?
DTSC did that.
Okay. Well, that's great. So, I was saying I think it would make it is more likely to happen as part of an enforcement action than part of a permit condition. So I'm glad to see that there's some precedent for that.
Great.
Reactive is too late.
Did it before.
Yeah, reactive is too late. And how many times do you really get out to and see what's going on? Reactive is way too late. There needs to be something proactive. It needs to be at the, if you want this permit, just like we do with our driver's license and everything else we get. If you want your driver's license, you have to have insurance on your car. If you want this permit, you have to do this. It's done all the time.
No, I I understand your point. My point is, I think we have the more authority currently to be able to implement it as part of an enforcement action, as opposed to as a permit condition, because I don't think we currently have the authority to do that.
But I'm saying in the future it can be both.
In the future, perhaps it could.
There is some legislation that allows for that under AB 2588, the Air Toxic Substance Program. If the facility has emissions above certain levels, the risk levels, it would have to hold a public meeting and have the community that explain why they have a risk of their level. So if you work it into legislation, then it works really good.
And come up with a risk reduction plan.
Right, and then if it's above certain levels, you have to.
Well, related to that, just sort of our refinery in Bloomington had to hold a when the risk went up and it went over the threshold, they had to explain to the public why it went up and going down. And they did use the to do that.
Well, I'm certainly not, I mean, I think it's a great idea to have those folks here. We do have limited authority to compel them to be here, however. You've identified some.
Well, Tony, I think another interesting thing to talk about in terms of permitting is, so we always talk about like the people that are at the table, and so we have a lot of permitting conversations in which the department is presenting what is occurring at the facility, some of the regulations that have been put in place and so on. And so I think from the public's perspective, sometimes they see it as though the department is specifically presenting on behalf of the facility. And I think that is a perception that I think needs to change somewhat. Something actually very interesting that we did in one of Elsa's projects in Westmoreland is we actually had one of the community groups, or a couple of the community groups, that are working on that project and have already registered a petition. They also had a table in the same way that we had all of the other tables. So it allowed the community members to really see a full perspective of the project, because I know a lot of people here, you guys have always been engaged, and so you understand hazardous waste, you know how to work with hazardous waste. But a lot of people that are coming in new to that, they deserve all of the information, including like some of the messages that you all provide. And so something very interesting that we did is we actually had them there to present their argument. I think that allows for the department to really be seen as a neutral party that is going to make a decision based on all of the information gathered through this permitting process.
That sounds a good idea. We do have, you all probably have participated in more than I have. We do have a public participation process when we issue permits. So if the permit is applied for, and if there's a proposal to make, when we get to the point of making a decision or proposing a decision, you all have a chance to have input on that. But we also hear from people even before we get to that step. So we have people who know that a permit has been applied for, and they want us to know what their concerns are about that. So you can always let us know. I'm always happy to actually hear about things earlier rather than later, because we have more options for addressing them. The earlier we hear about the issues, the earlier in the process we hear about issues, the more options we have for dealing with them.
Cynthia Babbage for the record.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I think the more that there are stakeholder conversations similar to this, the better off we're going to be. One of the things that we've done in our community is brought different partners together, because we see that agencies alienate other agencies, and as Cesar was saying, there are some people who are very savvy about what's going on in their communities, and there are others who just move into this situation. So I would really like to see the agency, Jesse had a really great suggestion, and he actually put a budget to it, which I thought was pretty awesome. But that's really the fact of things, is communities don't have the resources to just trot up to Sacramento. That's why it's really nice you came down here.
But if there were some really concerted efforts that we knew ahead of time that were happening, that you can bring stakeholders together, I think that it just brings that balance. You know, instead of you having to go deliver a message, we're happy to deliver it. The problem is that these conversations go on and we don't even find out about them most often until they've long occurred down the road. And so I would really like, you know, to see the agency do more of partnership, bringing together and really being the facilitator more. I mean, you've got a great facilitator to kind of show you the balance, and trust me, I don't say that about everybody, but that's where I really think we need to be moving. I feel like we now have our people in the agency, not in every place they need to be, but our people are there, and they need to be heard, and they don't need to be stifled by a process that we don't agree with. If anarchy would be fast enough, then maybe that would be the road that we take. Although I'm thinking I probably should have started that, and I might have been ahead of the game, and then, you know, 23 years ago. But that's really what we're coming to you. We're coming to you with ideas, our hopes, our dreams, and we can be civil and have these nice discussions until we're just trod on too much, and then it turns into these very hostile confrontations that really a lot doesn't get done. We have to go back to our polluted communities. The people who are doing public participation feel like, wow, I'm trying to help. That's what didn't work out really well. And so I really hope you would embrace some of the groups that have really been spearheading the partnerships and let us help you. You know, that's what tonight was about. I'm like, wow, you're coming to LA? I mean, I don't even know how that happened, but like, that's my backyard. And, you know, luckily I have some very wonderful colleagues who took time out of, you know, their day to come and try and present and show a community perspective, or I don't think you would have had this tonight. And so it's really great that somebody on the panel put that forward, but what if we didn't have that will or that need to do that? That's the more of the cooperation that I think we really need to bring to bear as we move forward.
Well, so there are several points that you raised that I want to address, but first of all, I couldn't agree more with you that if we didn't have all these folks here, we wouldn't have had what we had tonight, which was a very useful and very beneficial discussion about hopefully projects that will lead us in a positive direction. But more to your point, we had some news today from our office that we have a new public participation deputy director who will be starting December 3rd? December 5th. And she will also, both she and I are based in the Chatsworth office. So we have people down here in Southern California at the deputy director level. We are trying to have more of a presence, establish more of a presence here in Southern California, because we do have some very, very big facilities and some very big problems in Southern California that we want to address. And we do want to allow all of you who are here tonight and those and folks who aren't here tonight but who've been at other meetings for other facilities and for other issues have greater access to folks at DTSC. So that's one step we're taking. When you meet Geraldine Lopez Mendoza is our new Deputy Director for Public Participation. Some of you may already know her. She has been involved in environmental justice community for quite some time. But when you have, I hope you will all have a chance to meet her, because she's going to be a fantastic addition to the DTSC staff and will address some of the very issues I think that you just raised. So that was very good news we got today. Okay. Well, thank you all very, very much for coming.